Let's talk about a subject that seems to make a few people uncomfortable, especially in the art and entertainment/music world: money. Hey everybody, my name is Travis Mark. I'm the host of the Musician's Mentor podcast, and now this Musician's Mentor YouTube channel. If you've never checked out any of the interviews that I've published with the podcast, please go to the playlist section on this channel or simply search for the Musician's Mentor across your favorite streaming platform. Likewise, if you've been to the channel before or are new to the channel and have yet to subscribe, please do hit that subscribe button. It is extremely helpful. Thank you. Today, I want to talk about three just ideas/concepts/tips, if you will, that might help you think a little bit differently about your money, especially if you are a self-employed individual, like most of us are in the music world. I'm not going to ramble on about stuff too much. These are just things that I have found helpful. So let's get straight into it with tip number 1. The very first thing you should do, if you haven't really thought about educating yourself on money, rather than getting lost on all the different blogs and websites and videos that talk about it, simply go and either purchase, hire, or find a way to read The Richest Man in Babylon book by George S. Classman. This book is very easy to read. It's quite thin. You could probably read it in a day. I think there'd probably also be audio versions available if that's more your bag. The basic premise in the book talks about how you should take 10% of your monthly income and put it aside, so that eventually you have enough put aside that you can put that money towards something else that allows you to grow more income. So we're not saying put it aside and eventually buy a guitar, unless that guitar is going to help your income. But basically, you put it aside and either invest it so that you can get passive income, so that your money is working for you while you are still working and making money over here. So you're earning this money, you're taking a portion of this money, you put it here, and eventually you've got enough put here so that you can put that into something else to make you more money. So you're earning this money and that earns this money. And hopefully at some point, this money starts to even exceed the money you're earning here. And that's when you can start changing career paths if that is the goal. But long story short, read the book. It's incredible. I cannot hype it up enough. I first came across this book maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I wish I had discovered it when I was like 20. Because while I am in a very fortunate position and feel extremely blessed to be in that position, I feel that this book would have changed my whole financial course. Point 2, and unfortunately, all of us musicians seem to suffer from this in some way, shape, or form, but don't get sucked into the gear trap. You don't need every shiny piece of gear that comes out. I know that's easy to say when you can see a few guitars in the background here and maybe a couple other bits and bobs, but the truth is you don't need it all. Depending what you're trying to do, usually your one quality piece of gear or certain things done to even a moderate piece of gear will be more than you need as a gigging musician. And even if you start getting into production and things like that, unless you are trying to have a $1 million studio somewhere with microphones that cost more than most people's cars, this is the important part. So look after your ears and buy quality gear, but you don't need every gear that gets advertised, because you're just going to waste your money. And 9 times out of 10, you won't even be able to sell it for the same value that you purchased it for. Yes, there are exceptions to the rule. Certain vintage guitars, certain signature model instruments are very sought after, and collectors do purchase these things. But I wouldn't personally put all my hopes and dreams into buying a vintage piece of gear, hoping that I'm going to profit by 100 times on this. Rather find ways to not waste your money, not rack up credit card debt, not put yourself in situations where you have no money working for you, like we said in point 1, and all this beautiful gear that just sits there gathering dust, especially if you aren't using it. I know I alluded to credit card debt in point 2, But let's push that a little bit further in point 3. And that would be, look at your bills, be mature about it. Look at your bills each month. If you are like me, you're going to write that all down and constantly look for ways that you can save money or cut costs, or at very least, not have to rely on credit cards. A lot of the US population live on credit cards. I'm sure it's the same all over the world, but you don't have to do that. That is a downward spiral that unfortunately is harder to get out, especially once your interest rates get on a certain amount of money. It's harder to get out of that than what it is to just not get in it at the first place. So if you find yourself, I don't know, paying for parking at every gig when you could maybe park for free but walk an extra block, you can save some money. If you're always buying yourself food at every gig when you could have maybe saved yourself a little bit of money by eating before you got to the gig or when you get home, depending on the times, of course, that's a way to save some money. Because all of these places put markups on the prices that you would potentially buy something at a fraction of the cost for. Obviously, I'm not trying to sound cheap here. I'm just saying there are ways to always tweak and save money. I'm not trying to sound cheap. I'm simply trying to say, if you look at your finances in a very mature way, you'll find that usually there are things that you can cut out of your lifestyle to save money, which brings us all the way back to point 1. If you can find a way to save 10% of your salary every month, and the earlier you do this, the better, you can eventually invest that into something, whether that's stocks or bonds or businesses or property, that will allow you to grow a passive income. And if you get into that point while you're still young enough to make money, you should be in a better position than you might be currently. Now, please, I am not a financial advisor, so go and rather speak to a professional about these things, especially if you are starting to think about ways to be smarter with your money. But for some reason, the creative people I know never ever want to talk about money. And I think it's not a good place for us to be in. We should talk about this easier and be transparent so that we can eventually, as musicians and entertainers, push our salaries up and not always get that stigma of being broke musicians. You don't have to be a broke musician. Just think a little bit more logically and go bloody read that book. It's incredible. And please note that I do not have any type of partnership or affiliation with The Richest Man in Babylon. I just think it's an incredible book that if you're trying to start thinking about different ways to use your money, that will be a good place to start. I hope that helps. If you have anything to add, please do drop a comment below. Once again, my name is Travis. I will talk to you on the next one. Peace.